The sky was black, filled with heavy smoke that refused to move. Fires still burned here and there, small and angry, lighting up the broken pieces of ships and armor scattered across the ground. The smell of metal and ash filled the air, making it hard to breathe. The battlefield was silent now. The screams and roars from earlier had faded away, leaving behind only the crackling of dying fires. Among the ruins, a young alien girl slowly crawled. Her silver-blue skin was covered in dirt and blood. Her clothes were torn and one of her arms hung limp by her side. Every movement was painful. She had fought until she could not stand anymore. Now, with every breath feeling heavier than the last, she dragged herself toward a fallen pillar, trying to find a place to rest before the end. Her name was Ceres, though there was no one left who would call her by it. She had been part of a proud army, but they had fled when the enemy overwhelmed them. They didn't look back. No one came, searching for the wounded. No one came for her. In her heart, she knew she had been left behind, forgotten. Ceres closed her eyes. She had nothing left. No strength, no hope, no reason to fight anymore. A single tear escaped from the corner of her eye and mixed with the dust on her cheek. She was ready to let go. Ready to disappear into the ash like so many others. But fate had other plans. Not far from where she lay, a human moved carefully through the battlefield. His name was Liam. He wasn't a soldier. Not anymore. He had been a medic once, helping both human and alien lives during the war. Now, after the battles had ended, he stayed behind, searching for anyone who might still be breathing. He couldn't stand the thought of leaving someone to die alone. Liam walked with slow steps, his eyes sharp and his ears alert. Every piece of rubble he passed, every broken helmet he checked carefully. So far he had found only silence. His heart grew heavier with each step. Maybe today would be the same as yesterday, empty. Then he heard it, a faint, almost silent gasp. He froze. Was it the wind or? Liam turned quickly toward the sound, stepping over broken metal and cracked stones. His boots crunched on the ground as he rushed forward. He followed the noise until he saw her, a small figure slumped against a broken pillar, barely moving. Without thinking, he hurried to her side. His training kicked in. He checked for breathing. Weak, but still there. Her skin was cold and her body trembled lightly. She had deep wounds along her side and leg. She had lost too much blood. She didn't have much time left. Gently, he spoke to her. Hey. You're okay. I'm here. You're safe. Of course, she didn't understand his words. Her people spoke a different language. But something in his voice, soft and calm, made her stir. Her eyelids fluttered open weakly. Through blurred vision, Sarah saw a face she had never expected to see, a human. She tried to move away, fear flashing in her eyes, but her body refused to respond. Instead of hurting her, the human knelt down and wrapped his arms carefully around her, lifting her as if she were made of glass. His touch was careful, his grip strong but kind. Ceres blinked, confused. Weren't humans supposed to hate her kind? Weren't they enemies? She was too weak to resist. She let her head fall against his shoulder, too tired to fight anymore. And deep inside her, a tiny, fragile hope flickered. Maybe she wasn't alone after all. Liam moved as fast as he could without hurting her further. He carried her across the broken ground, through the remains of war, back toward a small shelter he had built from the wreckage days ago. It wasn't much, just a place to protect from the cold and wind, but it would have to do. As he walked, he kept talking to her in a soft voice. He knew she probably didn't understand, but maybe the sound would comfort her. He promised her, promised himself that he would not let her die here. The stars above them blinked through the smoke, cold and distant. But here, on the ruined battlefield, one small act of kindness began to change everything. Ceres closed her eyes again, but this time, she wasn't giving up. She was resting in the arms of a stranger, a human who refused to leave her behind. Liam carefully carried Saris through the wreckage, moving as quickly as he dared. Every step made his muscles ache, but he didn't stop. The girl in his arms was too light, too cold. He could feel how close she was to slipping away, and it filled him with fear he hadn't felt in a long time. The shelter he had built wasn't far now. It was hidden inside the wreckage of an old cargo ship, one of the many destroyed during the battle. Pieces of metal and broken walls had been pushed together to form a small safe place from the wind and rain. Liam had made it after realizing he would stay longer than planned. Every day he searched for survivors. Every day he hoped. Until today there had been none. Today, there was her. He reached the shelter and pushed inside carefully. The walls groaned under the weight, but they held. Inside it was dark and cold, but it was safer than the open battlefield. Liam gently laid Saris down on a soft blanket he had made from stitched-together fabric. She didn't move much. Her breathing was shallow, almost silent. Liam quickly pulled out his small medical kit. It was almost empty, but he would make it work. He cleaned her wounds with water he had collected, working with careful hands. She winced once or twice, but she didn't fight him. She didn't have the strength to. Her side was badly cut, and her leg had a deep gash. Liam tore strips of cloth and wrapped her wounds tightly, doing his best to stop the bleeding. He knew she needed real help, proper medicine, better care, but for now this was all he could give. When he finished, he sat back, breathing heavily. His own hands were shaking. It had been a long time since he had treated someone this close to death. He wiped sweat from his forehead and looked at her face. She was young, he realized, maybe just a few years younger than him. Without the dirt and blood, she might even be beautiful in a strange, alien way. Her skin was a soft shade of blue, and her hair, though matted and dirty, was silver like moonlight. She looked peaceful now, her chest rising and falling slowly. Liam moved to the corner of the shelter and pulled out a small metal bowl. He poured some water into it and placed it near her. Then he found a small piece of dried food from his pack and chewed on it slowly. His stomach ached with hunger, but he didn't care much. He watched over her instead. Hours passed. The fires outside died down. The smoke in the sky grew thinner, revealing the stars. Liam stayed awake, listening for danger, watching over the girl who had somehow survived. Near midnight, Saris stirred. Her eyes opened slightly and she looked around in confusion. The last thing she remembered was the battlefield, the pain, the loneliness. Now she was in a dark shelter, lying on something soft. She turned her head weakly and saw the human sitting nearby. Fear rose in her chest. Humans and her people had fought bitterly. She had seen them in battle, strong, fearless, ruthless. Was this human different? Or was he just waiting for her to wake before finishing her off? Liam saw the fear in her eyes and raised his hands slowly. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe here." Of course, she couldn't understand his words, but his voice was gentle and his hands were empty. No weapons, no threats. Saris tried to sit up but cried out softly as pain shot through her side. Liam moved closer, but not too fast. He helped support her gently, letting her lean against a piece of broken wall. He picked up the bowl of water and offered it to her. She stared at it for a moment, suspicious, but her thirst won. With shaking hands, she took it and drank. The water tasted strange, but it was clean. It filled her dry mouth and gave her a small spark of strength. Liam smiled as she drank. It was a small victory, but a victory all the same. When she finished, she looked at him again. Her voice was weak, almost broken, but she managed a single word in her own language. Saris. Liam didn't understand the meaning, but he guessed it was her name. He tapped his chest with his hand and said, "Liam." She blinked at him, confused, then understood. Names. He was telling her his name. "Saris," she whispered again. He smiled warmly. "Saris." In that moment, something changed between them. A bridge formed, a fragile, delicate bridge made of trust. It was small and shaky, but it was real. The wind howled outside the shelter, rattling the metal walls, but inside, a small light had begun to grow. Two enemies, two strangers, now tied together by survival, by kindness, and by the simple, powerful act of saving a life. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring. The war wasn't truly over. Danger still lurked beyond the ruins. But for tonight they had found something precious in a world full of ashes. Hope. The next morning the sky was still dark with smoke, but the worst of the fires had gone out. The battlefield outside was silent like a graveyard. Inside the small shelter, Liam woke up early. His back ached from sleeping on the hard ground, but he didn't care. His first thought was of Saris. She was still sleeping, breathing softly under the worn blanket he had placed over her. Her face, though pale and tired, looked more peaceful than it had yesterday. Liam let out a small sigh of relief. She had made it through the night. That was a good sign. He moved quietly, not wanting to wake her. He found a small metal cup and heated a little water over a tiny fire he kept hidden under broken debris. It wasn't much, but warm water might help her heal faster. As he worked, he thought about what he should do next. Staying here was dangerous. Rogue soldiers still roamed the ruins, and not all of them cared about peace. If they found Saris, they might kill her, or worse, and if they saw him helping her, they wouldn't care that he was human. He would be seen as a traitor. But Liam had already made his choice. He wasn't going to leave her. When Saris finally woke up, she found Liam sitting near her, carefully pouring the warm water into the same small bowl from the night before. She tried to sit up again, wincing at the pain in her side. Liam noticed and quickly moved to help her, offering his arm for support. At first she hesitated, her body tensed, unsure whether she should trust him. But then she remembered the night before, the way he had cared for her wounds, the way he had given her water and kept her warm. Slowly she leaned against him, allowing him to help her sit. Liam offered her the bowl. She stared at it for a moment, then took it with trembling hands. The warm water soothed her dry throat and brought a little color back to her cheeks. When she finished, she looked at him carefully, studying his face. He smiled at her. Soft, friendly. No harm, he said slowly, tapping his chest, then pointing at her. No harm. She didn't know the words, but she understood the meaning. His voice, his eyes, even his careful movements, all of it told her the same thing. He was not her enemy. A small part of Saris relaxed. Not completely. Years of fear and training couldn't vanish overnight, but enough. Enough to give him a small nod. Liam smiled wider at that. Over the next few hours, they found ways to communicate without words. Liam would point to things, water, food, the shelter, and Saris would watch carefully, learning his simple signs. In return, she taught him a few gestures from her own language. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes they laughed when they misunderstood each other. Other times, frustration showed in their faces, but they kept trying. Piece by piece, trust grew between them. By midday, Liam knew he needed to check her wounds again. He gestured toward her side, showing the bandages. Saris hesitated. In her world, showing weakness to others had always been dangerous. But when she looked into Liam's eyes, she saw no judgment, no cruelty, only concern. Slowly, she nodded. Liam worked carefully, unwrapping the cloth. The wounds were still ugly, but they were not infected. That was good news. He cleaned them with fresh water and wrapped them again with new cloth strips he had torn from his own shirt. Saris watched him closely as he worked. Every movement was gentle, respectful. When he finished, she touched his hand lightly. A simple thank you. Liam smiled again. He didn't need words to understand. Outside the shelter, the wind picked up, scattering ashes across the battlefield. Liam peeked out through a crack in the wall, scanning the ruins. No movement, no patrols. For now, they were safe. but he knew it wouldn't last. They couldn't stay here forever. Sooner or later, someone would find them. And if they were found, Saris wouldn't stand a chance, not wounded, not weak. Liam didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing clearly. He wouldn't let her face it alone. That night, as the stars appeared through the smoky sky, Saris and Liam sat together near the small fire. They shared a piece of stale bread Liam had saved, passing it back and forth without words. They watched the flames dance, casting soft light over the broken walls around them. Saris leaned back against the wall, her body tired but her heart strangely full. She had been ready to die. She had closed her eyes expecting nothing but darkness. Instead, she had opened them to find a human, a stranger, cradling her, saving her, showing her kindness she had never expected. For the first time in a long while, Saris allowed herself a small, fragile smile, and Liam, seeing that smile, knew they had both found something worth fighting for. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new challenges. But tonight, in their little shelter built of trust, hope burned brighter than fear. Morning came slowly, the gray light creeping into the small shelter where Liam and Saris had spent the night. The smell of ash and smoke still hung heavy in the air, but the fires outside had burned down to cold black ruins. The battlefield was silent, like the world itself was holding its breath. Liam opened his eyes and stretched his sore arms. His first thought was of Saris. He turned to check on her and found her already awake, sitting quietly against the wall. She watched him with alert eyes, but there was no fear this time, only a careful curiosity. He smiled and gave her a small wave. To his surprise, she raised her hand slightly and copied the gesture. It wasn't perfect, but it made Liam chuckle, softly. Little by little, she was beginning to trust him. They shared a small breakfast, half a stale cracker and a little water. It wasn't much, but they both accepted it without complaint. Every bite mattered when survival was the only goal. After eating, Liam pulled out a broken piece of metal and began drawing shapes on the dusty ground. He sketched a rough map, the ruins they were in, the shelter, and a distant mark that showed the old human outpost he hoped was still standing. He pointed to their shelter, then to the outpost. Saris tilted her head, confused. Liam tapped the shelter on the ground, then pointed at Saris and himself. He tapped the outpost drawing and gave a thumbs up, smiling to show it was good. Saris stared for a moment, thinking. Then her eyes widened in understanding. He wanted to take her there. He wanted to help her escape. Her chest tightened. She had never known kindness like this. Her people had trained her to expect betrayal, to expect cruelty. Yet this human, this stranger, wanted to risk his life for her. Still, fear gnawed at her heart. She pointed toward the battlefield and made a sweeping motion, then touched her fingers to her lips. Her people's gesture for danger. Liam understood her easily. His face grew serious. He nodded. Yes, he said quietly. Danger everywhere. They were both thinking the same thing. The enemy patrols, the rogue soldiers, the risk of getting caught. Even if they tried to escape, it would not be easy. And Saris, still wounded, could barely walk. Liam looked at her leg, still wrapped in cloth, and then back into her eyes. We can do it, he said firmly. Saris didn't understand the words, but the steady tone of his voice and the determined look on his face said enough. She took a deep breath and nodded once. If he believed they could make it, she would try too. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Liam strengthened the shelter just in case they needed to hide quickly. He packed the little food and water they had into a torn backpack. He found a sturdy metal rod and sharpened it to use as a weapon if necessary. Meanwhile, Saris worked too. She practiced standing, using the wall for support. Every step sent pain shooting through her side, but she clenched her teeth and forced herself to move. Liam watched her with quiet respect. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a fighter. At sunset, the sky turned blood red over the ruins. Liam and Saris sat side by side near the entrance, sharing the last of the water. They didn't talk much, they didn't need to. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was filled with understanding. Two beings from different worlds who should have been enemies, now planning to survive together. As the stars appeared in the sky, Sarah suddenly spoke. Her voice was soft, almost like a whisper. She said a few words in her language, words Liam didn't understand. But the way she said them, the emotion in her voice made him pause. She pointed at herself, then touched her hand to her heart. She pointed at Liam and did the same. Connection, trust, gratitude. Liam's chest tightened with emotion. He had seen so much hate, so much destruction during the war. He had forgotten what simple kindness could mean. He tapped his chest, smiled, and said, "Friends." Sarah tilted her head at the unfamiliar word. Then she smiled, a small, shy smile, and repeated after him, her accent soft and strange. "Friends." The word felt new, like a small treasure they had found among the ruins. As the night deepened, they lay down inside the shelter. Liam stayed, awake a little longer, listening to the quiet breathing of the girl he had saved. Tomorrow they would begin their journey. It would be dangerous. It would be hard. But they would face it together, and somewhere deep inside, in a place beyond fear and pain, hope had taken root. They were no longer just survivors of a broken war. They were friends, and that made all the difference. Morning came with a sharp, cold wind. Liam woke to the sound of metal clanging somewhere far in the ruins. His heart raced. He quickly sat up and peeked through a small crack in the wall. Movement. Soldiers. Not human soldiers. Alien soldiers, Sarah's people, but not the ones who had fought to protect the weak. These were the ones who followed a cruel leader, the kind who believed only in strength and loyalty to power. Liam's mind raced. He knew why they were here. They were searching for survivors, not to save them, but to erase any proof of what had happened on this battlefield. He turned back and saw Sarah sitting up, her body tense. She must have heard them too. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else too. Determination. She wasn't the same weak girl he had found days ago. She had grown stronger. Liam moved quickly, but quietly. He packed their few belongings into the backpack and tightened the straps. He pointed toward the back wall where he had made a hidden exit just in case. Sarah nodded. She pushed herself up slowly, leaning on the wall for support. She winced in pain but didn't complain. She was ready. They moved carefully, slipping out through the hidden path into the broken ruins behind the shelter. The ground was rough and uneven, but they had no choice. Staying meant death. Liam led the way, helping Sarah over fallen beams and sharp rubble. Every noise they made sounded too loud in the heavy silence. They knew the soldiers were getting closer. Suddenly, a shout rang out. The soldiers had found the shelter and realized someone had been living there. "Go," Liam whispered urgently. They ran, or tried to. Sarah's legs slowed her down, but she pushed herself harder, gritting her teeth against the pain. Liam stayed close, ready to catch her if she fell. They ducked behind a broken wall, breathing hard. Liam risked a quick look over the edge. He saw 3 soldiers searching the area, weapons ready. One of them barked something in their language and pointed toward the path they had taken. "They're tracking us," Liam said under his breath. He looked at Sarah. She was pale, sweating from the effort. She couldn't keep running much longer. Liam made a decision. He pointed toward a tall wreck in the distance, a broken tower from a crashed ship. It wasn't far, but it would offer better hiding places. If they could reach it, maybe they could lose the soldiers. Sarah followed his hand, understanding his plan. She nodded, her jaw set in determination. They moved again, slower now, staying low and using every piece of cover they could find. Broken engines, pieces of metal, ruined walls, they became shadows slipping through the dead battlefield. Halfway to the tower, Sarah stumbled. She cried out softly, falling to one knee. Liam was at her side in an instant, pulling her up. But it was too late. A soldier spotted them. He shouted, raising his weapon. Liam didn't think. He grabbed the sharpened metal rod from his pack and threw it with all his strength. It hit the soldier's arm, making him drop his weapon. The soldier shouted in anger, but the delay gave Liam and Saris precious seconds. They ran again, Saris leaning heavily on Liam. Every step was a battle, but they didn't stop. Finally, they reached the tower. Inside, the shipwreck was dark and full of twisted hallways and broken rooms. Liam pulled Saris into a narrow space between two walls, pressing them both into the shadows. They held their breath as the soldiers stormed into the wreck. Footsteps echoed around them. Harsh voices barked orders. The soldiers searched room after room, but the wreck was big and full of hiding places. Minutes felt like hours. Liam could feel Saris trembling against him, not from fear, but from exhaustion. She had pushed herself too hard. He tightened his arm around her, offering silent comfort. Finally, the soldiers gave up. Their angry voices faded into the distance. Liam waited a little longer, just to be sure, before letting out a slow breath. They were safe. For now. He looked down at Saris. Her eyes were closed, but she was awake, breathing heavily. You did good, he whispered, even though he knew she wouldn't understand. But maybe she did, because she gave him a small, tired smile. Liam leaned back against the wall, letting his head rest for a moment. They had survived another day, but he knew things were only going to get harder. They needed to reach the human outpost soon. If they stayed here too long, luck would run out. He looked at the stars through a crack in the ceiling. We'll make it, he promised. Beside him, Saris drifted into a deep, exhausted sleep, trusting him to keep that promise. And Liam knew he would do everything he could to protect her. Because somewhere along the way, saving her had become more than a mission. It had become his reason to fight. The wind howled through the wrecked towers, sending gusts of dust swirling around Liam and Saris. They had found a small corner inside the broken shipwreck to rest, but it didn't feel safe. The soldiers could be anywhere. It was only a matter of time before they figured out where the pair had gone. Liam couldn't relax. Every noise made him tense. Every shadow felt like a threat. He sat with his back against the wall, looking out into the ruined space that used to be a bustling outpost. The walls around them were cracked and broken, but they were still hiding from the world. Saris slept lightly, curled up beside him, her body too weak to fully rest. Her leg had become more swollen after their hurried escape. It was only a matter of time before they would have to leave the shelter and keep moving. She couldn't stay hidden for long. The pain in her face, even when she was asleep, told Liam everything he needed to know. She had suffered too much already. He couldn't allow her to continue like this, not for long. Liam knew the stakes. The soldiers, even the ones hunting her, would stop at nothing to capture or kill anyone who had witnessed the battle's destruction. He thought about the outpost he had marked on his map, still far away in the wastelands. It wasn't a guaranteed, safe place, but it was their best chance. If they could reach it, they could find help. Human help. They could escape from this nightmare, but there was a problem. Saris was weak. Her injuries weren't healing quickly, and the long distance was only going to make things worse. The road ahead was full of dangers, more soldiers, more traps, and the harsh terrain that could break anyone who wasn't prepared. Liam didn't know how much longer she could keep going, but he had to try. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice. Liam. Saris had woken up, her eyes blinking as she tried to sit up. She winced at the pain in her side, but she didn't cry out. She was getting stronger. She had to be, or they wouldn't survive. He moved quickly to her side, offering his support. Easy, he said softly, helping her adjust. You need to rest a little longer. But Saris shook her head, her eyes wide with determination. No. We need to go. We can't stay here. Liam paused. He knew she was right. They couldn't hide forever. The longer they stayed in one place, the more likely they were to be found. But was she ready to travel again? Her leg was still swollen, her strength still not fully returned. He gave her a reassuring smile. We'll go when you're ready. But we're doing this together. Saris gave him a brief nod before closing her eyes for a moment, trying to calm herself. She wasn't ready, but neither of them had a choice. Liam began to gather their things. He packed the rest of the food and water, making sure everything was ready for the journey ahead. He glanced at Saris. She was trying to rise, her legs shaking with the effort. He hurried to her side again, offering his hand to steady her. "You don't have to rush," he said, concerned, but she refused to stay down. "We have no time to waste," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "We need to go." Liam knew she was right. They couldn't waste any more time hiding in fear. The soldiers would eventually move on, but they would have to move quickly if they were going to escape. The outpost was still a long way off, and every step would be difficult for Saris. He reached out and placed his hand on her shoulder. "All right, we'll go. But we're sticking to the shadows. We can't afford to be seen." Saris gave him a tired smile, the first real smile he'd seen from her in days. "I trust you." With that, they set out again. The journey was slower this time. Liam stayed close to Saris, helping her every step of the way. Her leg dragged behind her, and every few minutes she had to stop to rest. The wounds on her side were still healing, but they weren't enough to keep her down for long. Liam was careful not to push her too hard, but he knew they couldn't stop until they reached the outpost. As they moved through the remains of the battlefield, Liam kept his eyes sharp. He heard the distant hum of alien machinery, the heavy footfalls of soldiers patrolling nearby. Every time they came close to a patrol, they hid, behind ruined walls, under broken ships, in the shadow of crumbling towers. The sun was low by the time they reached the first stretch of open land. It was a dangerous moment, an open area with no cover. If any soldiers were nearby, they would see them. "We need to cross this fast," Liam muttered. Saris nodded, but she was too weak to hurry. "I can go faster," she whispered. Liam took her arm. "We're in this together. Don't push yourself too hard." They started moving, quick but careful. Each step felt like an eternity. The soldiers could be anywhere. Liam's heart raced, but his focus was sharp. He could feel Saris's weight against him, but he wouldn't let her fall. He wouldn't let her be left behind. Finally, they reached the other side of the open land, finding a place to rest in the shadow of an old rock formation. Saris collapsed against the rocks, gasping for air. Liam knelt beside her, checking her wounds. They were bleeding again, but it was manageable. He took a deep breath and looked out at the distance. "We're closer now," he said, his voice soft but steady. "We can make it." Saris nodded, her eyes tired but filled with something Liam hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "We will make it." Liam's heart swelled with something he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. They could do this. Together, they could survive. And maybe, just maybe, there was a future for them both. The moon hung low in the sky, casting its pale light over the landscape. The air was cold, but it felt like a relief compared to the burning heat of the battlefield they had left behind. Liam and Saris had made it farther than they thought they could. The journey was hard, but the thought of the outpost ahead kept them moving forward. Saris was quieter now. She was exhausted, her steps slower, her breath heavier. Every movement she made seemed to drain her more, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. She had to keep going. Liam could see the pain on her face, and his heart tightened. He had seen soldiers suffer worse injuries and still fight on. But Saris wasn't a soldier. She was a survivor. And right now, that was enough. They walked in, the shadows of broken buildings, staying away from the open areas where they might be spotted. Every so often, Liam would look back at Saris, checking to make sure she was still with him. Her steps were slower, but she kept pace. She was strong, in her own way. They had made it through the worst of it. They had survived soldiers, wounds, and the endless fear of being caught. But there was one thing they hadn't yet conquered: the fear of the unknown. What would happen when they reached the outpost? Would the humans there help them, or would they be treated as enemies? Liam didn't know, but he had made a promise to Saris. He would get her there, no matter what. He would not let her down. As the night wore on, the ruins became more distant. The trees, broken and twisted by war, began to thin out. Liam knew they were close. He could feel the weight of the journey lifting, but there was still a part of him that couldn't believe it. They were still alive, still moving forward. Almost there, Liam said softly, turning to Saris. She looked at him with tired eyes, but her face was calm. She didn't say anything, but the way she nodded made him feel a little lighter. They didn't talk much after that. The quiet of the night was enough, a kind of peace that they hadn't had in days. The only sounds were the soft crunch of their feet on the broken earth and the distant wind. They finally reached the edge of a small, broken forest. The outpost was just beyond it, the lights faint but visible in the distance. Saris stopped and looked up at the stars. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. Liam stopped beside her, watching her closely. She was exhausted, but she wasn't giving up. And neither was he. "We can make it," Liam said quietly. His voice was full of the promise he had made to her. Saris didn't say anything, but she gave him a small smile, the kind that made his heart feel lighter. It was small, but it was enough. She trusted him. She had come to trust him, and that trust was worth more than any words could say. They moved again, this time more slowly, more carefully. The lights of the outpost were closer now, and Liam could see the outlines of the structures that made up the base. It looked like a place for soldiers, but he wasn't sure if anyone there would help them. As they neared the entrance, Liam spotted a few guards standing near the gate. They were scanning the area, but they didn't seem to notice Liam and Saris approaching. He didn't slow down. If they hesitated, they might be seen. They had to act now. Liam pulled Saris close, making sure she was hidden in the shadows. They crept forward, staying low, their hearts beating fast. The guards were too busy with their patrol to see them. "Just a little farther," Liam whispered. Saris nodded, her face pale, but determined. She wasn't going to stop. Not now. They reached the outer wall of the outpost, and Liam carefully peered around the corner. He could see a small gap in the wall where the guards didn't watch closely. It was their chance. He gave Saris a nod, and they moved quickly toward it. They slipped through the gap and into the heart of the outpost. There were more buildings, more lights and more soldiers. But this was different from the battlefield. There was an order here, a quiet hum of life. Liam's heart pounded in his chest as they moved deeper into the base. He didn't know where they were going or if they'd even find help, but he couldn't stop now. Saris was right behind him, her footsteps faint but steady. They walked for what felt like hours, moving through the corridors, searching for someone who might help them. Finally, they reached a small building with a sign that read medical. Liam didn't hesitate. He pulled the door open and stepped inside. The room was quiet, and the air smelled clean, almost sterile. There were a few beds, some medical supplies, and a single nurse sitting behind a desk. She looked up in surprise when she saw them. Liam didn't wait for her to speak. He rushed forward, supporting Saris as she staggered toward the desk. "Please," Liam said, his voice urgent. "We need help." The nurse's eyes flicked between them, and then she stood up. "What happened to her?" Liam's voice was steady but filled with fear. "She's injured. She needs medical attention." The nurse didn't ask questions. She motioned for them to sit, and Liam helped Saris onto the nearest bed. As the nurse prepared to examine Saris, Liam took a step back, watching her carefully. He had done it. They had made it. They were safe, at least for now. As the nurse worked, Liam sat down beside Saris, taking her hand in his. She was still awake, still aware, but her strength was gone. She had given everything to get here, and now for the first time in days she could rest. "Thank you," Saris whispered, her voice soft. Liam smiled, his heart full. "We made it," he said. "Together." and for the first time in a long time, the future seemed a little less uncertain. With Ceres by his side, he knew they could face whatever came next, together.